this revolution, truly, this remembrance of this word, witch. Witch is like a fire word, right? So there's these certain words within our languages that have different connotations, our own personal etymology with that word, right? Things like the word God. That can mean a lot to different people. Father. That can mean a lot to different people. Mother. Witch. So before we dive in, I just encourage you to take a deep breath and exhale. Grounding yourself into the earth. Opening up your heart. And bringing in a malleable energy into your being. Allowing this message to be heard without the connotation of the way you may have experienced your understanding of what a witch is and the witch archetype before this. Opening. Because it's through our opening and through the gaining of information that we can allow our perception to shift and change, and in turn become more integrated. You see, my history, my studies are rooted in theology. I have always been a devout seeker of the divine. From a young age, like 5 years old, I was passionate about the spiritual. Not only did I grow up with gifts of being able to see what was beyond this realm, but I had a deep, intimate, loving guidance relationship with Jesus Christ, Yeshua. So through my studies, through the way that I was raised in a monotheistic religion, my connotation and my understanding of the word witch was rooted in what I knew to be witchcraft, demonic entities, which I feel like for the majority of a Western point of view, if you've been raised in religion, that's kind of the connotation, the relationship that we have to the word witch. Something we're a little scared of. We don't really know too much about it, but we know it's bad. And if you're called one, you better get yourself right with Christ. It wasn't until I began opening deeper into my innate knowing that I was able to see the deception that was attached to this word. And I really realized I don't know what the hell people are really talking about when they're casting this, because we got to get that straight. Witch was a word that was cast. It was not a word that was claimed. Witch was a word that was cast when someone was about to go on trial. And these were not just them identifying beings. These were theys. These were he's. These were beings that were deeply in tune with nature, in tune with their indigenous knowledge that had been coursing through their DNA, the remembrance of their ancestors. And why do I say that? Well, let's do a little history lesson. Starting with colonization. The label was one that was cast in order to bind and in order to silence the being that was being cast the name witch. You see, these were revolutionaries. These were artists, these were poets, these were astrologers, these were musicians, these were medicine women, these were doulas, who were speaking up against the colonization that was happening at that time. Because not only were they being stripped of their native tongues, not only were they being stripped of their land, but they were also being stripped of the deep indigenous culture that was held within their beings, that was the sacred knowledge that had been passed down through generations. And on top of that, then there was a message of Christianity that was being forced upon them. I don't think there is anything wrong with following the message of Christ. But honey, you need to make sure you're actually understanding the lessons and the words of Jesus Christ, and not a colonialized version of the message of Jesus. How many of you Christians actually have read through your whole entire Bible? Are you actually reading the messages, the teachings of Jesus? Are you understanding them historically, culturally, and linguistically? Of when they were written and at what time and what language they were written? Do you understand the history of the Bible? How the King James Version, which is the particular version that many of your translations are built upon, was translated and picked through by a man, King James, who didn't even believe the message of Jesus. Okay, so when I'm talking about Christianity in the broad sense here and how it's connected to the word witch, I'm talking about Christianity in the domination empire, connected to Constantine, connected to the Crusades, connected to the first kind of inquisition of this time and the killing of indigenous knowledge. Okay, the wiping out of the tribes of Europe. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying that following Christ and Christ-mindedness is inherently wrong. I believe that at its core, it is true beauty. And that Christ-mindedness connects us into a deeper level of heart-centered love that allows us to extend to not only our communities, but to all beings and all living things. Because we realize that God, Christ, consciousness is within life itself. So, disclaimer, I am not saying that Christianity is inherently wrong. I am saying the domination empire and the perpetuation of the message of Christianity was done through a colonialistic agenda. And that's just facts. That's just historical facts. Look up the Crusades, look up Constantine. So when we're talking about the word witch, this was first introduced at that time. Before, you will not see these medicine women, men, and theys being referred to in any other way. You won't be seeing the demonization of the archetype witch. These were astronomers, these were music makers, these were spiritualists. They were the parallel of the magician archetype, with an interest that reached beyond the mundane, reached into the spiritual threads of our reality, understanding that this physical makeup isn't all that's here. It's the seeker, it's the bringer of secret knowledge, one that required deep study and required initiation. The witch is a creative force to be reckoned with, one that questions the status quo, one that questions the systems that are in order, and asking, is this really serving the all? And so, as this word was cast, flames were lit, fingernails were ripped, and bodies were buried alive, because these were the revolutionists that spoke up at this time of a colonized world. And it was introduced with the message of Christ, which I just really, 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 truly believe that Jesus would not stand for that. No. we're gonna leave it at that, because otherwise I'm gonna get on a whole nother soapbox. And also, just as a reminder, I studied theology in a historical, cultural, linguistic context. And so when I'm speaking on this, I actually do have a lot of knowledge and a lot of deep study to bring to light the way in which the mass spread of Christianity is incredibly problematic. Yet, I am not speaking against the message of Christ and who Jesus Christ is, and the miracles that occurred through him, and the alchemist that he was. Okay? We'll leave it at that. I love this quote. I can't remember where I found it, but it's, the witch brings forth the ideas that disrupt the current values and order, which is one of the reasons why the church feared her, them. Okay? Because at this time, having power outside the churches led to condemnation. The demonization of the witch, the labeling of the witch, it was done with intention to bind and to silence the being. Because they were standing up to an unjust power. So how do you steal the voice? You burn them. And this is starting in Europe. This is starting between Turkey and Ireland. This is where the expansion is happening. This is the very first demonization of medicine people. Where'd they go next? Africa. Where'd they go after that? Turtle Island. This is a pattern that reoccurs over and over again. And it's a specific agenda that's meant to silence and a desire to remove power from those that have the flame within them to stand up against those unjust powers and domination. As we look at this, I want to bring in some wisdom from Reverend Briana Lynn, as she talks about the witch being the wise, intuitive teacher, counselor, healer. And to claim this, she says, is to claim knowing the history of the word witch. These are beings that took a firm stance and stand against domination. There is a fear that is encrusted in the word witch. You know, you think of witch and normally you don't think of a being that's in their power. You think of a being that's wanting more power than they have. So how ironic is that that's the name that was cast at this time. And then we continue to see a demonization of anyone who is standing in their power, being cast in this role, this archetype of witch. You know, we see it in Disney. When you think witch, you either think over-sexualized or you think of an old hag. Either way, they normally have malintention, or at least that's the way that they're portrayed. But this isn't the truth of those who were actually labeled witch. To remind you again, these were herbalists. These were astrologers. These were music makers. These were scientists. These were the bringers of deep knowledge. The study of our natural and spiritual world. You see, it's through a patriarchal view that is still reinforced in our culture and in our media that highlights the shadow side of a witch archetype. And this is based in a religious bias. And of course, our dear Carl Jung, father of modern day psychology, only further perpetuates this distorted archetype through the demonization of her and her power. So who truly is the witch? And why do I choose to claim this? Because I am a seeker of divine knowledge. I understand that our connection to earth is one that is sacred, and to live in communion with her is one of the most beautiful things that we can do as guests on this planet. I vow to protect her, to work with her, and to learn from her. The songs of ancient knowledge in my bones echo the messages of my Celtic ancestors, those that experience this fate, and those that continue to experience this fate. We still live in a patriarchal society that still wishes to silence those that see a different way. Growing up in a patriarchal monotheistic religion, there was so much shame inserted towards sensuality, power as a female. Although I was raised in a modern day Christianity, that patriarchal understanding, it goes deep. Even as I'm trying to speak now, I can feel it in my throat choking up because of the fear. You know, that's how deep this goes. Because I am a woman who works with the wisdom of the earth, who works with the wisdom of the stars, and understands that this world is energetic and continual in vibration, that quantum physics allows us to see the manipulation of reality, that there's multiple realities happening simultaneously at one time. Yes, I will now claim the word witch. I will no longer be silenced.